I was on the night ferry deck when Lawrence Hughes first told me he was moving to Thailand. The wind was cold, the engine rumbled beneath our feet, and he had this look in his eyes I had never seen before. Not hope exactly, more like surrender. He said he needed to disappear for a while, start fresh. I thought he meant from work, from the grey English rain, from the memory of his late wife Margaret, who had passed 3 years prior. I had no idea he was about to disappear into something far darker, something that would nearly consume him whole. And when I finally learned what happened to him in that small coastal town of Surat Thani, I realized that some people do not run toward new beginnings. They run straight into traps designed specifically for them. This is Lawrence's story. And if you have ever trusted the wrong person, loved too quickly, or ignored the warning signs because you were lonely, you will understand exactly how a brilliant man can fall so far, so fast. Hit that subscribe button now, because what I'm about to tell you is a true story of manipulation, crime, and survival that will keep you on the edge of your seat until the very last word. Lawrence Hughes was 62 years old when he arrived in Thailand, a retired civil engineer from Manchester. Grey hair, deep lines around his eyes, still strong in the shoulders but carrying the weight of grief like a second spine. Margaret had been his wife for 37 years. They met in university, married young, built a quiet life in the suburbs. 2 children, both grown and living abroad. When she died suddenly from a heart condition, something inside Lawrence broke. Not loudly, not dramatically, just a slow crack that spread through him like frost on glass. He kept working for 2 more years, kept pretending everything was normal, kept smiling at dinner parties, and answering honestly when people asked how he was doing. But inside, he was hollow. And one day, he woke up and realized he could not do it anymore. He sold the house, took early retirement, told his children he needed time, and he bought a one-way ticket to Bangkok. He chose Thailand because everyone does. Because it was warm, because it was cheap, because nobody there knew him. He spent the first 2 months in Bangkok, walking through crowded markets, eating street food, learning basic phrases from a pocket dictionary. But the city felt too loud, too chaotic, too full of people who were also running from something. So he moved south to Surat Thani, a small town on the Gulf of Thailand, known mostly as a jumping point for tourists heading to the islands. But Lawrence did not want the islands. He wanted quiet. He rented a small house on the edge of town, near the water, with a balcony that overlooked fishing boats and mangroves. He spent his days reading, walking along the shore, learning to cook Thai food, badly. He made friends with a few local shop owners who spoke broken English. He started to feel for the first time in years like maybe he could breathe again. Like maybe grief could be something he carried, instead of something that carried him. That is when he met Supatra. It was a Tuesday evening in late April. The air was thick and hot, and Lawrence had gone into town to buy supplies. He was walking back toward the bus stop, carrying 2 plastic bags full of fruit and rice, when he heard shouting. Up ahead, near a closed-down shopfront, 3 men were arguing. Young guys, early 20s, tattoos on their arms, cigarettes hanging from their lips. They were speaking rapid Thai, and Lawrence could not understand a word, but he could tell it was escalating. One of them shoved another. A bottle shattered on the pavement. Lawrence slowed down, thinking he should probably cross the street, when one of the men looked directly at him and grinned. The man said something to his friends, and suddenly all 3 of them were moving toward Lawrence. He froze. His heart started pounding. He thought about running, but he was 62 years old and carrying groceries, and where would he even go? The first man stepped right up to him, chest to chest, and said something aggressive in Thai. Lawrence held up his hands, tried to back away, and that is when she appeared. A young woman, maybe 25, with long black hair and a soft face, stepped between Lawrence and the men. She started speaking quickly in Thai, her voice sharp and commanding. The men laughed at first, but she did not back down. She pointed at Lawrence, then at herself, then down the street, as if to say, "He is with me, leave him alone." One of the men said something crude, and she snapped back. There was a tense moment where Lawrence thought they might ignore her, might push past her. But then the leader of the group spat on the ground, muttered something under his breath, and waved his friends away. They walked off laughing. The woman turned to Lawrence, and her entire demeanor changed. She smiled, gentle and concerned, and asked in careful English if he was okay. Her name was Supatra. She worked at a small guest house nearby. She said she saw what was happening and could not just walk away. Lawrence, still shaking from adrenaline, thanked her repeatedly. She waved it off like it was nothing, said those guys were always causing trouble. Said he should be careful walking alone at night. They stood there on the street corner for a few minutes, talking. She asked where he was from. He told her. She asked why he came to Surat Thani. He gave her the short version. She listened with this quiet intensity, like she actually cared. And when she smiled, it was warm and real, and exactly what Lawrence needed in that moment. Before they parted, she wrote her phone number on a scrap of paper and told him to call if he ever needed help with anything. Translation, directions, whatever. Lawrence took the paper, thanked her again, and walked home feeling strangely lighter. Like maybe the universe was not entirely cruel. Like maybe he had just made a friend. He called her 2 days later just to say thank you properly. She suggested they meet for coffee. He agreed. They met at a small cafe near the waterfront. They talked for 2 hours. She told him about her life, how she grew up in a rural village north of Surat Thani, how her parents were farmers who struggled to make ends meet, how she moved to town at 18 to find work, send money home, try to build a better life. She was smart, articulate, and Lawrence found himself genuinely enjoying her company. She laughed easily. She asked thoughtful questions. She seemed interested in him, not as a tourist or a source of money, but as a person. When they parted, she hugged him briefly, and Lawrence felt something he had not felt in years. Connection. They started meeting regularly. Coffee turned into dinners. Dinners turned into walks along the beach. Supatra introduced him to local places tourists never saw. Small restaurants tucked down alleyways. Night markets selling handmade crafts. Temples where monks chanted at dawn. She became his guide, his translator, his friend, and slowly, carefully, something more. Lawrence did not plan to fall for her. He was not naive. He knew the cliches about older Western men and young Asian women. He had seen the judging looks from other expats. But Supatra felt different. She never asked him for money. She never pushed for anything. She just seemed to enjoy spending time with him. And Lawrence, who had been so lonely for so long, let himself believe it was real. Now pause for a moment. Think about what you have heard so far. Write in the comments what feels suspicious to you at this point in the story. What warning signs do you see that Lawrence might be missing? I will wait. The shift happened gradually, so gradually that Lawrence did not notice it until he was already deep inside it. It started with small things. Supatra mentioning that her mother was sick and the hospital bills were expensive. Lawrence offering to help without hesitation. Her protesting at first, saying she could not accept, but eventually giving in with tears in her eyes. Then her younger brother needed money for school fees. Her landlord raised the rent unexpectedly. The guest house where she worked cut her hours. Every few weeks, there was a new crisis. And every time, Lawrence stepped in. He told himself it was fine. He had the money. He wanted to help. And she always promised to pay him back. Always seemed genuinely grateful. Always made him feel like a hero. But there were other things too. The way she started pulling away when he suggested they travel together to Bangkok. The way she was always busy on certain nights and vague about where she had been. The way her phone would buzz constantly with messages she would not let him see. Lawrence tried to ignore the small voice in his head saying something was wrong. He told himself he was being paranoid, that cultural differences explained the secrecy, that she had her own life and he had no right to demand more. But the truth was, he was falling in love with her. And when you are in love, you forgive things you should not forgive. You explain away things that should not be explained away. You choose trust over instinct because the alternative is too painful. 6 months after they met, Lawrence had given Supatra nearly £15,000. He did not think of it as £15,000. He thought of it as helping someone he cared about, as being generous, as doing what Margaret would have wanted him to do with the money. But the amount kept growing, and Supatra, who had once been so independent and proud, now seemed to need him constantly. She stopped working at the guest house, said it was too stressful. Lawrence suggested she take time off, figure out what she wanted to do. He would support her. She cried and thanked him, and said she did not deserve him. That was when the relatives appeared. One evening, Lawrence was at Supatra's small apartment when there was a knock on the door. She tensed immediately. Her face went pale. She told him to stay quiet. She opened the door and 2 men walked in without invitation. One was in his 40s, thick build, gold chains around his neck. The other was younger, lean and dangerous looking. They started speaking rapidly in Thai, their voices hard and aggressive. Supatra responded in a shaky voice, trying to calm them down. The older man saw Lawrence sitting on the couch and paused. He said something to Supatra and she shook her head quickly. The man smiled, but it was not a friendly smile. He walked over to Lawrence, looked him up and down, and then said in rough English, "You her boyfriend?" Lawrence nodded, confused and increasingly alarmed. The man said, "Good, then you help her." And he left. After they were gone, Supatra broke down crying. She told Lawrence those men were debt collectors, that her family owed money to a local lender, that the debt had been passed down from her father, who borrowed money years ago to buy land that turned out to be worthless, that the interest had compounded and now the total was nearly 2 million baht, about £50,000, that the lender was connected to dangerous people, that if the debt was not paid, her family could be hurt, that she had been working for years trying to pay it off, but it was impossible, that she was terrified, and that now, because those men had seen Lawrence, they thought he was a way to get their money. Lawrence held her while she cried. His mind was racing. £50,000. It was most of his retirement savings. It was insane. But he looked at this woman he had come to love, shaking in his arms, and he thought about what those men might do to her. He thought about the fact that she had saved him from those guys on the street, and now maybe it was his turn to save her. He told her he would figure something out. He told her not to worry. And she looked up at him with such desperate hope that he felt like he had no choice. Over the next few weeks, the pressure intensified. The debt collectors came back. They were polite at first, almost friendly. They explained the situation to Lawrence in broken English. They showed him documents, contracts, all in Thai that he could not read. They said they understood he was a good man, that he cared about Supatra, that all they wanted was what was owed. They gave him a deadline. 2 months. Lawrence tried to negotiate, asked if they could set up a payment plan. They laughed, said it was all or nothing, said if he could not pay, maybe Supatra could work off the debt in other ways. The implication was clear. Lawrence felt rage and fear twist inside him. He told them he would get the money, but he did not have £50,000 liquid. Most of his money was tied up in investments, in accounts that took time to access. He started the process of liquidating everything. He called his financial advisor back in England. He made excuses about why he needed the money. He ignored his children's phone calls because he did not want to explain. And through it all, Supatra stayed close to him. She cooked for him. She held him at night. She told him she was sorry, so sorry, that she never meant for him to be involved, that she loved him, that after this was over they could start fresh, maybe leave Surat Thani, move somewhere safe, build a life together. And Lawrence believed her, because he needed to believe her, because the alternative was that he had been a fool. What do you think happens next? Write your predictions in the comments before you keep listening. The money came through on a Friday. Lawrence transferred it to an account Supatra gave him. She said it was her uncle's account, that he would handle paying the debt collectors directly. Lawrence asked why he could not just pay them himself. She said it was safer this way, that these people did not trust foreigners, that her uncle knew how to deal with them. Lawrence hesitated, but ultimately he transferred the money. £50,000. Gone in an instant. Supatra hugged him, crying with relief. She said it was over. They were free. They went out for dinner that night, a small celebration. She seemed lighter, happier. Lawrence felt exhausted but hopeful. He had done it. He had saved her. Now they could move forward. But the next day, Supatra did not answer her phone. Lawrence called repeatedly, texted. Nothing. He went to her apartment. The landlord said she had moved out that morning, took all her things, did not leave a forwarding address. Lawrence stood in the empty apartment, staring at the bare walls, feeling his entire world tilt. He tried to stay calm, told himself there was an explanation. Maybe she had to leave quickly for her own safety. Maybe she would contact him soon. He went home and waited. 1 day, 2 days, a week, nothing. That is when he got the visit. Not from Supatra, from the debt collector, the older man with the gold chains. He showed up at Lawrence's house with a smirk on his face. He sat down without being invited and said, in English that was suddenly much better than before, "You got played, old man." Lawrence stared at him. The man laughed. He explained it all, how the whole thing was a setup, how the fight on the street had been staged to make Supatra look like a hero, how she worked with them, luring in lonely foreign men, building trust, creating fake emergencies, and extracting money. How Lawrence was not even the first, how this was a business. The man said Supatra was good at her job, really good. Made men fall in love with her, made them want to save her. And they did. Every time. Lawrence felt like he was going to be sick. He asked where she was. The man shrugged, said she had moved on, probably already working on the next target. He stood up to leave, then paused and said, "You should go home, old man. Thailand is not for you." And he walked out. Lawrence sat alone in his house for days. He did not eat, did not sleep, just replayed every moment in his head, every smile, every touch, every tear, trying to figure out which parts were real and which were performance. And the worst part was, he still did not know. Maybe some of it had been real. Maybe she had felt something for him, even just a little. Or maybe he was still making excuses for her, still trying to salvage something from the wreckage. He thought about going to the police, but what would he say? That he willingly gave money to a woman he barely knew? That he had no proof of fraud, no evidence, nothing but his own stupidity? He thought about trying to find her, but where would he even start? She could be anywhere. And even if he found her, what then? Would he beg her to explain? Would he demand his money back? Would he try to understand why she did it? None of those options felt like they would bring him peace. So he did the only thing he could think of. He left. He packed his bags, paid off his lease, and bought a ticket back to England. Back to the grey rain. Back to the empty house he had sold that someone else now owned. Back to square one. But not quite square one. Because now he was broke. And broken, and carrying a shame so deep, he knew he would never be able to talk about it. I did not hear from Lawrence for almost a year after that. I called a few times, left messages, sent emails. Nothing. I assumed he wanted to be left alone. I assumed he was dealing with whatever had happened in his own way. And then, out of nowhere, he called me, asked if we could meet. We met at a pub in Manchester. He looked older, thinner, but there was something different in his eyes, something harder. He told me everything, the whole story. And when he finished, I did not know what to say. What do you say to someone who has been through that? If you have been following this story, hit that subscribe button now and leave a comment. Has anyone you know ever been caught in a romance scam? How did they recover? Share your thoughts below. We need to talk about these things openly, because Lawrence is not alone. This happens to people every single day. After Lawrence returned to England, he fell into a deep depression. He could not face his children. He could not tell them he had lost their inheritance on a woman he barely knew. So he lied, said he had made some bad investments. They were concerned, but understanding. They offered to help. He refused. He got a small flat in a rough part of town, took a part-time job at a hardware store just to have something to do, spent his evenings alone, watching television, trying not to think. He felt humiliated, not just because he had been scammed, but because he had ignored every warning sign. Because he had chosen to believe a fantasy over reality. Because he had been so desperate for love that he had walked willingly into a trap. But then something unexpected happened. He started researching. He wanted to understand how it worked, how these scams operated. He went online and found forums full of men sharing similar stories. Different countries, different women, same patterns. And he realized it was not about him being stupid. It was about predators being skilled. These operations were sophisticated. They targeted specific vulnerabilities. They used psychology, manipulation, and patience to break down defenses. And they worked because people are fundamentally good. Because we want to believe in love. Because we want to help. And because when you are lonely, it is easy to see what you want to see. Lawrence started attending support groups for scam victims. He heard stories worse than his. Men who lost everything. Men who took out loans, sold houses, destroyed their families. Men who could not recover. And slowly he started to forgive himself. Not completely, not easily, but enough to keep going. He started volunteering, talking to other victims, sharing his story, warning people, turning his shame into something useful. But there was still a part of him that wondered about Suputra. Was she still doing it? Was she hurting other people? Did she ever think about him? And then, 18 months after he left Thailand, he got a message. It was from a woman named Sarah. She said she was a journalist based in Bangkok, working on a story about romance scams. She had heard about Lawrence's case from someone in a support group. She wanted to know if he would be willing to talk. He agreed. They spoke over video call for 2 hours. Sarah explained that she had been investigating these operations for months, that she had managed to infiltrate one of the networks, and that she had information about Supatra. Lawrence's heart stopped. Sarah said Supatra's real name was something else, that she was part of a larger criminal organization based in Pattaya, that she ran multiple scams simultaneously, using different identities, that Lawrence had been one of at least 6 men she was working at the same time. Sarah showed him photos. Supatra with different hair, different clothes, different men, all of them older, all of them white, all of them looking at her with the same expression Lawrence remembered from his own reflection. Love, trust, hope. Sarah asked if Lawrence wanted to be part of the story, if he was willing to go public with his experience. She said it could help other people, could expose these networks, could maybe even lead to arrests. Lawrence thought about it for a long time, and then he said yes. He said yes because he realized that staying silent meant Supatra and people like her would keep winning. That shame only protected predators. That maybe, just maybe, his story could save someone else from making the same mistake. The article came out 3 months later. It was detailed, well-researched, and devastating. It named names, showed evidence, and included Lawrence's story as the central narrative. The response was immediate. The Thai police launched an investigation. Several members of the organization were arrested, but Supatra was not among them. She had disappeared, gone to ground, possibly moved to another country, another city, another identity. Sarah told Lawrence not to expect justice, that these people were good at vanishing, that the best he could hope for was that she had been scared enough to stop. Lawrence accepted that. It was not the ending he wanted, but it was the ending he got. Here is what surprised him, though. After the article, people started reaching out, dozens of them. Other victims, other survivors, thanking him for speaking up, sharing their own stories. And slowly, Lawrence realized he was not alone, that this thing that had destroyed him had also connected him to a community of people who understood, who did not judge, who could help him heal. He started a blog, began writing about his experience, about the psychology of scams, about how to recognize warning signs, about how to protect yourself, about how to forgive yourself when you fall. And it helped. Not just other people. Him. Writing became therapy. Sharing became healing. 2 years after leaving Thailand, Lawrence met someone. Her name was Anne. She was a widow, same age as him, living 2 towns over. They met at a community center. She had read his blog. She told him she admired his courage. They started talking, slowly, carefully, both of them damaged in their own ways, both of them cautious about trust. But there was something real between them, something quiet and steady. They took it slow. Coffee dates, long walks, no rush. And eventually, something that looked like love began to grow. But this time, Lawrence knew the difference. This time, he was awake. And then, just when Lawrence thought his story was over, he got another message. This one from a blocked number. No name, just a text. It said, "I am sorry." That was all. 2 words. Lawrence stared at his phone for a long time. He wanted to believe it was from Supatra, that she had seen the article, that she felt guilty, that some small part of her had been real. But he also knew it could be a trick, another manipulation, another way to get under his skin. So he did the only thing that made sense. He deleted it. He did not respond. He did not engage. He let it go. Because here is what Lawrence learned. You cannot save people who do not want to be saved. You cannot love people into being good. And you cannot let the past control your future. What happened to him in Thailand was real. The pain was real. The loss was real. But so was his recovery. So was his strength. So was his ability to rebuild. And that was worth more than any answer Supatra could give him. What you need to understand is that this story is not rare. Romance scams cost people billions every year. They target the vulnerable, the lonely, the hopeful, and they work because they exploit our best qualities, our capacity for love, our desire to help, our belief in second chances. But there are warning signs: rapid intimacy, financial emergencies, secrecy, inconsistencies, isolation from friends and family. If you see these patterns, pause. Ask questions. Do not let emotion override logic. And if you or someone you know has been scammed, understand this: it is not your fault. These are professionals. This is what they do. Healing is possible. Community is available. And shame has no place in survival. Lawrence is 66 now. He lives with Anne in a small cottage outside Manchester. They have a garden. They travel sometimes, but never to Southeast Asia. He still writes his blog, still helps victims, still carries the weight of what happened, but differently now. Not as a burden, as a reminder that he survived, that he grew, that he chose, in the end, to let love be something real and quiet and safe. He told me once that he does not regret going to Thailand. He regrets staying too long. He regrets ignoring his instincts. But he does not regret the journey, because it taught him something essential: that running from grief does not work, that starting over is possible, and that the worst thing that ever happened to you does not have to define you. So if you are watching this, whether you have been scammed or know someone who has, whether you are lonely and thinking about taking a risk, whether you are just curious about how these things work, remember this: trust is earned slowly. Love is built carefully. And if something feels wrong, it probably is. Listen to that voice. Honor your instincts. Protect yourself, because there are people out there who will see your vulnerability and use it against you. But there are also people who will see your vulnerability and honor it, who will love you slowly and carefully and honestly. Those are the people worth waiting for. Now it is your turn. Have you or someone you know ever been targeted by a romance scam? What happened? How did you spot the warning signs? Or maybe you ignored them, just like Lawrence did. Share your story in the comments below. Let us create a community where we can talk about these things openly, without shame, and help each other stay safe. And if this story resonated with you, hit that subscribe button. We will be sharing more true stories of survival, resilience, and the complicated ways people hurt and heal each other. Follow along, stay safe, and remember, you are not alone.